Good morning, everyone. We're so excited that you were able to join our Rural Ecosystems monthly Connect call. Again, if you would update your name, some of you have the direct link title. We're excited to have an asset mapping program laid out for you today. So if you have questions at any time, feel free to drop them in the chat box. We'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat box as well, letting us know where you're zooming in from. Going to hand it over to Beth and Cal and Mary Margaret for today's presentation.
Hi, I'm Beth Demke with North Dakota's STEM ecosystem. You can see the three of us there. Mary Margaret Small is with Clarkson University, North Country STEM Ecosystem, North Country STEM Learning Network. She wears many hats. I'm with North Dakota STEM Ecosystem and North Dakota's Gateway to Science. And Cal is with the Arizona Science Center and the RAIN project. We're going to do kind of a quick presentation where we are tag teaming a little bit, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions and comments, because I think when we start talking about asset mapping, I hear a lot of people that are looking for answers, not just a presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started, and then you can ask your questions as we go along. So the first thing, the big takeaway from this one that I would like to give you, there's three things. The first is that learners should be at the center of the asset map. So we've got a short definition. Asset map is a set of tools helping to identify your resources in the community, aligning with your mission. So the first thing is that learners are at the center. The second being that your definition of community will vary. It'll vary depending on what your community is. Is it a municipality? Is it a region? Is it a state? That'll make a big difference as to what assets you're looking for and where those will be found. And then the third takeaway that I would give you is that it is mission and vision driven. So those need to guide the efforts for recruitment and engagement. And once you've got those three things in mind, then that will help to guide you a little further. And we'll move on with Cal.
So here is kind of a logic model that is commonly used when you're trying to conceptualize what kind of asset mapping you're going to do. So just like Beth said, on the right-hand side, you can see a local level. This is a local concept. So this would be, sorry, my cat's very loud. This would be a town, a city, an organization, etc. A fairly small level. The ecosystem level on the left, a larger, more dynamic level, and the process. So asset mapping and needs identification are a back and forth. When you start your asset map, often you start identifying needs gaps, then you go back to your asset map and make it more dynamic, add more to it. These are tools that feed into your strategic plan and help to guide along with your mission and your vision what goes into the plan, and then you make data-driven decisions. The thing with strategic planning, just as most of you know, you have to be careful of mission drift so that you stay very close to your mission and your vision. Once you start seeing assets and the needs start piling up, it's very easy to get caught up in mission drift. You want to make sure that doesn't happen, or else you will spread yourself too thin. Beth, Mary Margaret, you're next.
Cal used the term dynamic, and asset mapping really is a dynamic process. It is not, let's do this once a year and put it on the shelf. It is fluid. It needs to reflect goals, objectives, mission. So for most assets, whether they are organizations or schools or not-for-profits, etc., sometimes once you identify the key player and the person who's going to engage with you, sometimes they change. And that's why it's very important to do a review at least annually, because people are not, don't have their feet in concrete, particularly in this day and age where mobility is facilitated by the fact that many of us are working virtually. The other piece that feeds into this is that sometimes new assets move into your area and you want to engage them as appropriate in whatever your initiatives are. So there's an outreach component that says people come, people go, assets change over the course of time. The other piece with asset mapping is that one size does not fit all. And we are going to share with you 3 different types of asset mapping this morning. They are just different. One is not better than the other. Each one is appropriate to the kind of organization and the kind of ecosystem that we live and breathe in. So as you reflect on what we're going to say, you may tweak, we hope you do tweak our comments to fit your own particular situation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cal.
And the next slide. Perfect. So this is the RAIN ecosystem. RAIN is the Rural Activation and Innovation Network. We were initially funded by NSF to study and then help co-create ecosystems in rural Arizona. These are the 4 areas that we work in. The eastern side of the state, or the right-hand side of this map is the eastern side of the state, and that's bordering on New Mexico, and the southern part is Mexico. So very diverse populations, several tribal nations, quite a mixture of agriculture and a few settlements. Nothing, most of the towns are under 10,000 people. So next slide, please. So asset mapping. One of the things when we started doing this, when we were supporting each of these regions to start their ecosystems, the first thing we did was asset map. And what I have found over the years is a graphic organizer makes conceptualizing so much easier. This is one graphic organizer, one of many. I have seen these done in, instead of squares, done in concentric circles, in pie wedges, in just crazy polygons with circles and spider organizers. Use whatever it is that works for you. The idea is to identify the different asset silos or sectors so that it helps people, because I've done it 2 ways. I've done it where we identified the sectors and one where we didn't. When you don't identify sectors, it takes twice as long because folks don't know where to start. And so by providing them the identification, you start that conversation earlier, and you essentially don't waste people's time. There are a series of questions that really do go around asset mapping and the structure. So answering these questions before you start makes this process a lot easier too. So why are you doing it? That's a big question. And what is your scale? So scale is huge. If you're going, we worked on a county-wide basis. Arizona, the counties we work in, like many Western counties, are very large in square mileage. Not like the East Coast counties where they're fairly small. So big scope. are you working on a town level? Are you working in an organizational level? These really do help to provide you focus. How do you plan? How do you plan to use the map once it's done? Are you going to build a GIS and pin these assets on there, and then identify gaps that way? Are you going to do it a visual? Are you going to create a database? Who will have access to it? All of these questions are really important, because once you start, other people are going to want to see it. And then how do you want to brand it? Do you have a logo? All of these things you really should pre-think. How do you want to keep the information current? Just like Mary Margaret said, folks change. Businesses come in and out, folks come in and out of different positions. Are you going to crowdsource the information gathering, or are you going to contract it? There's a funding issue. If you don't have funding, it's better to have some pathway in which you engage your network, so that they help keep the asset map current. Because if you just give it to one person and it's not funded, it's problematic. So kind of conceptualize your cost, your time, cost, and expertise on how to keep this moving forward. And then who's going to maintain the map? Once it's created and it's a public facing, who's going to maintain it? It's dynamic. You need to kind of set that in motion before the entire process starts. If you have these answered, it's significantly less stressful as you start to update the map itself. Mary Margaret?
Thanks. Okay, this is my ecosystem, the green part at the top called North Country. It is one of 10 regional councils within New York State. About 14 years ago, through a grant from, yeah, sure. I'll figure it out in a minute. The state began the process of developing STEM networks, and they were developed along the Thruway, which runs east-west to New York State. No one thought about us in the North Country, because like many rural areas, we sometimes become an afterthought. But for us, geographically, we are bounded on the north by the St. Lawrence Seaway, in the east by Lake Champlain, and in the west by Lake Ontario. So 3 of our 4 boundaries are water-based, and our southern boundary is the only place where we are actually connected to the rest of the state. So that presents a set of challenges in and of itself, as well as the fact that right in the middle of our ecosystem, we have a 3 million acre forever wild forest, where nothing can be built, roads cannot be put through. It will and is forever wild, with a large part of it being in the Adirondack Mountains. The other uniqueness for us in our region is that we have the only dual nation reservation in the country. So our Akwesasne Tribal Council is a governmental function that crosses Canada and the United States. And so the tribal lands actually operate in 2 countries and require, for us in the education field, require a great deal of articulation. When we look at, and Beth, the next slide, please. When we look at asset mapping for us, we decided as a state team at some point that we would identify our stakeholders, and we identified these entities as stakeholders. And this is the model that we would use. So there would be some commonalities across the state, because our geographic and political differences are many. So as we started the conversation in my region, and it was a conversation, it was a large group meeting that said, can you populate each of these nodes with the resources in your region? Now, because my region covers 7 counties, and the counties are very diverse and do not have huge population centers, and because local identity is critical to any initiative, I've divided my ecosystem into the East, the West, and the middle, and have leadership teams in each of those areas. And so initially we did an overview of all 7 counties, the whole ecosystem, and populated these nodes. But then we drilled deeper in regional conversations about making sure that we were inclusive of all the resources within that region. This is important because as we move forward with initiatives that support our goals and objectives and our mission and our vision, we don't do it necessarily across 7 counties. We do it regionally. We do have some initiatives that are common, but what they look like in one of the 3 regions is very different because the political climate is different, the buy-in from different balances within the resources is different. But we still go back to our asset map as we identify needs, as we identify areas that we need to focus on in order to accomplish our goals. We go back to our asset map and ask the question, who needs to be involved? What are our resources? And those are the entities that we engage in whatever the project is. Cal said it's dynamic and it needs to be reviewed, and it does. Annually, we review our goals and objectives, and in that process, we also review who are our assets, what are our assets, who are the new businesses, who is in a leadership position that perhaps wasn't in a leadership position a year ago or 6 months ago, who have we not connected with well that we need to consider. So that dynamic piece that says you can identify your structure perhaps, but your structure and who populates that structure and who becomes your valuable resource for any given project or initiative that will support your vision and mission will change and needs to be reviewed at least annually, more often, and sometimes the new kid on the block comes to the surface within the context of a given initiative. So this model is somewhat different. And again, it's not a square and it's not a spider, it's a bubble or maybe a cloud. But we like the cloud because it reminds us that we really are shooting for lofty goals and shooting for connections. And with that, I'll turn it over to Beth.
All right. So in North Dakota, we started back in, I think it was 2009, and began with an asset map, like Cal said, with their ecosystem as well. And honestly, it was not dynamic. It basically kind of fell off and no one was using it. So we recently went back to the drawing board and started over. And so I'm going to tell you about our recent asset mapping project, which I was not completely satisfied with, and I'll tell you a little bit about why. So we started out by defining the project, and some of the examples that Mary Margaret has shared, Cal shared, we had other examples throughout the rural STEM ecosystems that we looked at that helped us to define what our project would look like. We are in a situation where we have no hired staff at all. We all work well more than full-time, those of us that are on the board. So we needed to hire a consultant, and our money comes, the little bit of money that we have comes from the state. We were required to use the lowest bidder. So that's the first thing that I was not pleased with. And then what we did is we used the categories that you see across the bottom: industry, informal education, K through 12, higher ed, and government. That's where we sort of started with identifying where those potential assets would come from. And we developed a survey with that consultant and started to distribute that. What I would have liked to see is a follow-up to that survey. We didn't get the participation I would have liked to see, but there was not a lot of follow-up. They didn't follow up with phone calls or emails or, basically what I would call beating the bushes to get participation. So you can see, I mean, North Dakota is a very large geographic state, but as far as population, we have less than 1 million people. Less than 800,000 people. You all probably live in states where at least one metropolitan area has more than that. We're spread all over the place, but we have what I call pockets of greatness. There's some really awesome things going on in our state, but you can be 20 miles down the road and not have a clue what's going on 20 miles away from you. To us, that was the main impetus to why an asset map was important. And I don't think it has accomplished that goal yet, but we're going to. We started with that Google survey. Eventually it fed into what you're looking at here, which is a Microsoft Power BI map. We are now working with the state to get it added to their website, which is administered by the Department of Public Ed, and CTE, their career technical ed, is helping to shepherd it into the overall system, which I think will make a huge difference in the way that this is both managed and maintained. So it's getting there, but all of the things that Cal mentioned and that Mary Margaret mentioned, I cannot in good faith say that that's where our asset map is right now, but we're striving to get there. And the examples that we've seen from other rural ecosystems are helping us to determine, where we need to go. And I should be a little embarrassed to show you what I've got here, but I think it's important for you to see that it doesn't always go exactly the way you want it. Sometimes your hands are a little tied, and you can still persevere. And we are determined to make this what we want it to be. One of the things that I'm starting to do, because I'm also the director of a hands-on science center, and there are many science centers going up around our state. We've been the only one since 1994, and now there are going to be others. I'm starting to host a CEO's roundtable, and we're looking to those groups to perhaps be the hosts of hubs for our ecosystem, because it's in the hands-on science centers where we see a lot of dynamic, passionate people for STEM. So we're going to start leveraging that resource. So let's just wrap this up a little bit by a few things that we're going to ask you to keep in mind, and then we'll go straight into some questions, comments before our time is up. Go ahead, Mary Margaret, I think you're going to take the first one.
All right, this is really a recap of what the three of us have said to you, that our vision, mission, goals drive the connection and the involvement among the assets. Not every asset, not every person, not every organization is involved in every initiative, but all of them are involved at some time. And that's a critical piece, that as you review your assets, as you review your initiatives, you need to reflect and say, who haven't we pulled into the organization? Who haven't we connected with? Because like anything, lack of communication, lack of connectivity, we lose people, we lose organizations, we lose those valuable assets. So it's important to do a review of the asset map, not only globally, but within the context of what has occurred within the last 6 months or a year within your ecosystem. The other piece that's really critical, and I don't think I can stress this enough, personal connections are so very, very important. The world operates on relationships. People like to be recognized. They like to be encouraged to participate. They want their organization to be viable within the community, to be visible within the community. So whenever you can make personal connections, that's an important piece. Along with that piece of recognition, whether it's in a meeting or we happen to have an award ceremony every year, at a newsletter, the local newspaper, just being able to give people a pat on the back, which keeps them involved, or give the organization recognition, which keeps them involved, and sometimes helps with funding. So as you look at this and as you consider what we've said to you, the reality is it's very dynamic, not only at an organizational standpoint, but it's very dynamic at a very personal level for people in positions, but also the connections that you as a leader make with those people, and also with people that you want to bring into your organization as an asset to achieve your goals. And with that, I guess we're going to turn it over for questions, or at least another conversation.
Great. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so everyone can see everyone. There we go.
Well, we want to say thank you so much for all of you presenting and sharing.
Are there questions?
Yeah, and encourage if anybody has any questions. You can do the cool raise your hand or unmute. This is a pretty comfortable group. You can post in the chat if you have a question. But again, thank you, Beth, Mary Margaret, and Cal for sharing today. And we'll open it up.
I just want to recognize Lisa Blank, who's listed as a direct link. Lisa has been one of the most outstanding leaders in the Western section of our ecosystem. And she is also now on the steering committee for the National STEM Ecosystem Initiative. So she's one of the Legion of Volunteers. As Beth said, nobody's paid. So we operate purely on interest and commitment, and good people like Lisa.
Hey, I have to say, I learned from the best working with Mary Margaret. We've worked together for several years now, and it's been so much fun. A lot of work, a lot of fun, but I found like-minded people, and Cal and Beth and so many others here who do this because it's a mission, it's a passion, it's what we believe in, and appreciate all the sharing and all the learning that we've done together over time. It's been wonderful.
There was a question about sharing slides. Yes, I will send those to you, Kelly, and then let you disseminate them in any way you prefer.
Perfect.
I just wanted to add, I like the comment in the chat about connecting with workforce development and other agencies to help with the asset mapping. I thought that was, I came in a little bit late and I may have missed that, but it's pretty interesting as we interact with people from larger areas, more urban areas, you see these big, massive asset maps that they are able to assemble. And I think, Mary Margaret talking about the personal connections in our rural ecosystems, being on the ground, connecting face to face with all those individuals really makes a big difference. Sure, it does in the big organizations as well, but for us, that's huge.
Yeah, so
And
one
I
of
think-
the things,
Go
I'm sorry.
ahead, Cal.
One of the things that you can do, I put this in the chat, was, you don't have to create the asset map all by yourself. Use
Yeah.
other people's funding, right? Like leverage their funding for asset maps and then just put it in yours. The USDA over the last decade has funded local asset mapping processes. So your economic development folks, the Farm Bureau, your state agricultural departments, all of these probably have existing asset maps that you can use. So all you have to do is ask for them.
And just to reiterate that, your connection with your workforce development people, your workforce development boards, whoever, your industrial development agencies, is really critical because as we focus on students, our goal is to prepare them for the next step in their life and ultimately, hopefully, make them productive members of the workforce. So we have found that our workforce development people are really very willing and active players. And some of our best initiatives where we can reach what would be for us large numbers of students, which might be 2,000, really come from the connections within workforce. So that's a group that, as an educator, I probably would not have connected with, but have really bonded well with because they have a vested interest in what occurs within the PK-12 sector and within higher ed. So that's a group that, and they have money. That's the other part. Cal's shaking his head, yes, but they do have money. And they have other resources. So yes, they're assets, but they're assets with resources. Some of my assets are great organizations and people, but really they operate on a shoestring budget. And in our ecosystem, we have no budget, we have no paid staff. Lisa's laughing. It's true, but boy, the thing about rural folks is that we support each other in ways that urban areas do not. In our area, and it might be different in yours, we don't do a lot of regional infighting. At least that's why I have 3 divisions, because regionally, there's so few of us, and we are a committed group that we really will use whatever assets we have, we will share them and work for the common good. And I think that is really unique in many ways to rural areas.
And, kind of Mary Margaret, kind of going back to what Cal was saying about finding these different opportunities throughout the community and kind of capitalizing on it. I think we've been fortunate through a variety of grant opportunities to be able to bring pieces of that into what we do to benefit the ecosystem as a whole. So I think that's, it's been wonderful.
Sep, did you have a question?
I see, I think Bruce's hand was up before mine.
Go ahead. You're already online. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, thanks. I got to go without video because I'm at low internet here this morning, but this is Sep Spritzma from Southeast Arizona in Cochise County. I get to pal around with Cal quite a bit on various projects. And this, probably is just so basic, but just that communicate. The last 4 years I've been working on a collective impact project kind of focused on public health. And one of the kind of core pieces to collective impact is this regular communication between formal partners and then eventually also between informal partners. And this just hit me right in the face last night when I got a call about 4 p.m. from the hospital, a group that I work with there, asking if I could come stop by and help out with a science fair night in Benson, a community of about 6,000 or 7,000 people, pretty small. I mean, we have a Walmart and a Safeway and 2 stoplights. And when I didn't know what to expect. I'd kind of heard about it because I interact with the school. My kids went there, but they're grown up now. When I got there, it was both of our gyms full of STEM presenters and STEAM presenters from all over Cochise County and all over the state, including SciTech was there, the Arizona Science Center was there, the Bisbee Science Lab was there, SSVEC, our electric company, was there. I mean, literally, it was full, and there were probably 300 plus kids and families. And so normally I would have heard about that weeks ago, but I missed it in a social media connection or an email. So just, don't forget, like, even if you think like, oh, this has nothing to do with that person, or they may not be interested, send them an email, text them, tag them on social media. I'll be following up today with Jomel Jansen, who's the principal of the primary school who put this together. And this was just K-5, this number of kids and presenters, and working with her a little bit. She's an old friend to get more information about their spreadsheet of who was there, how were they invited, how to better connect up with them, how to add to the spreadsheet Cal and I have been working on with the RAIN group that's still functioning here. But it was amazing. And it only happened because a friend and person that I collaborate with at the hospital asked if I could come do some science with hand washing. And I was like, yeah, I'll come by. And then it was unbelievable. Parking lot was full, dozens upon dozens of presenters from cross sector and hundreds of families. You know, it was quite amazing. And so, yeah, just always throw that communication out and get connected to people, even if you think they may or may not be interested or have time, or it may not fit what they're doing. But that was just my comment after listening to those great presentations that you guys were giving just now.
That's great. Thanks. Bruce, what would you like to say?
Well, first of all, this is all great and incredibly helpful. We have been, like most of you, asset mapping, and you can't see me. Actually, I'm not on video because I think my hair looks really bad. But that being said, I am doing air quotes around we've been asset mapping because we started off, as most ecosystems did, just saying, well, yeah, let's find all of the players in the STEM game and stick them on a map somewhere. And then we quickly decided, well, yeah, kind of that's not fair in some ways because we haven't talked to them. We've just identified them and they're on a map. They don't know why they're on a map. Maybe we should have relationships with this folks. So we have full maps for North Carolina, but we've kind of backed up and rethought everything because we want to make it legitimate. And one of the slides that you had, I think, was very appropriate, which was, you know, reach out to those folks and make sure that they are not receiving something, but understanding why they're on that map. And so we've started kind of reconnecting with all those folks that we had, everybody from libraries to early childhood programs to, I mean, it went on and on, as you know, because it can get overwhelming. But that's not my question. Just wanted to let you know where we were. My question really is the complexity of people's maps. It's you know, as we sat as a group started talking about, we were like, well, you know, we'd love to have like a public facing part of the map where the public can say, oh, look, here are the things around me. And we know that was our original intent. But we also want to have like a private or an internal facing part of the map that says, well, you know, we have all these grants that came from one of our big grantors that we know where all their grants are around the state. Can we overlay that with population or with demographic breakdown of population to see who they really are serving with these maps? Where do we need to go and help people in those areas apply for these grants? And why would we want to do that? So we began to think of all the overlays that we would want to have for our own use as research as much as anything else. And so once again, it's that rabbit hole of we started going down complexity again. So the question is two here. One is what software do you use to kind of manage those kind of complex discussions, whether it's having a public and a private facing set of maps and overlays from the same set of data. And maybe that's the whole question. That really is, I think. And I see ArcGIS popping up. We've certainly looked that up and we have a couple of partners that are recommending that. Anyone talk about their particular map and how that's evolved to be able to kind of manage a public and internal facing set of data?
I have no valuable comments because we don't have two sets of data. We are a loosely coupled organization, so what we do during meetings. We do sort of publicly, if you will. We do keep minutes, but as we move through different initiatives, we probably should do a better job, actually. But we're not collecting data. Maybe it's because we're a legion of volunteers. We do keep records from year to year about particular events so that we know who was involved. But we really don't have that duality. And maybe that's something that we really do need to consider because I can see benefits to that.
I think you just have to test them out, Bruce, and see which one works for you and your level of technological expertise. Some of the tools are simpler to use than others.
I agree. And we've used Google Maps. I see that's popping up as well. And the layers that are there are great to be able to obviously, put things in, take things out, and see the things you're actually after. And again, this is a rabbit hole. And what I'm kind of hearing is don't go down the rabbit hole, but start off with the simplicity of all the gathering and displaying of data as you've described it. And then maybe that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, really keep it simple. Let's keep it as simple as possible. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming.
The
When you-
task, right? Like who manages it
Right.
throughout that year, and validating it. I think Casey's done a great job of showcasing the Google Maps, because then you can make a copy of it and then turn on and off whichever layers you'd like to showcase. And then, the communicate piece that you were talking about, or that Sep was talking about, is that we embed it on our website. So under the programs, right, that then it's public facing, whichever we choose to share, but then the internal team can focus in, zoom in on certain areas. So again, I would agree with Cal, keep it simple, try a few things, see if you're, tech savvy enough to manage it before you start paying for services on certain things. Because of course, like Mary Margaret said, limited resources, no resources, Google's free.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you all. I appreciate that.
All right, well, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you, everybody. We have a few more minutes if anybody wanted to drop any comments in the chat, but I would love for Beth, Cal, and Mary Margaret to drop your emails in case somebody wants to grab it from the chat box before we log off today. I will send out the recording and a copy of the slides to anybody who is on today, and our big 200 plus list that are part of our share out. So final thoughts, Beth, anything you want to share?
Well, like we've said before, it's a very dynamic process. So even though, as I shared earlier, we're not thrilled with the end result yet, it's not the end result, because it'll keep evolving and it's going to turn into what we want it to be, and will continue to get better as more participation happens. So just keep after it. And I think Cal mentioned in the chat, use this group as your resource. If you need help with anything, whether it's this topic or something else, we all work in rural areas. Call us, email us. We're here for you, for each other.
And I have one other thing too. I'm a part of a NASA rural affinity group, and we voted probably a month or two ago to open it up to folks outside of NASA. So if anybody wants to be a part of that,
I do.
I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share. We meet once a month, and we have a speaker just similar to this. It's 1 hour once a month. So I'll talk with Kelly and we'll send out an invitation.
I love it. I still think NASA's so cool at my age. So I'm in. I want to learn.
I just want to piggyback on that and just share a quick thing. We just did the Student Space Exploration Program through NASA, but we have no funding. We got one of our business partners to front the $25,000, the participation cost. And we have some smaller donations in order to support our students going to the launch, et cetera. But the $25,000 really, yes, it's a corporate donation, but that personal touch that says, we know who in that corporation we got to go talk to, and we know who in this business has a kid that was on one of the teams, et cetera. The personal connections in rural areas are so critical, not just for the financial end, but in order to move our mission forward and to make STEM a valuable part of everybody's life.
Great way to end the call, Mary Margaret. Nice comments. Thank you, everybody. We will be in touch. See you in the emails. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you.